Ms. Sinema.
Aye.
On this vote, the ayes are 52, the nays are 48. The decision of the chair stands as a judgment of the Senate. There will be order.
All right, guys. So as you can see there, Joe Manchin and Sinema stood up to the Democrat mob and decided to keep the filibuster. They went on record with their vote to say, you know what? No, we're going to maintain stability in the Senate, right? And basically that crushes Joe Biden's hopes and dreams of getting anything done with his agenda, his administration, unless he can come to some serious compromises with Republicans on certain issues, aka police reform. Joe Biden's presidency is done, right? And because of this, right, this whole filibuster thing stand in place, Democrats won't be able to pass their so-called Voting Rights Act. Now, this is kind of a big deal because Democrats have come out and said some controversial things that the mainstream media has kind of picked up on that they told us for the last year or so that you're not supposed to do, right? You can't do this or else you're dangerous, you're insurrectionist, and you should be banned from social media and impeached from office, right? That's what they said, okay? The Democrats and mainstream media. However, again, the mainstream media has kind of picked up on the hypocrisy here coming from the Democrats and have started to question Joe Biden and Kamala Harris about their rhetoric surrounding the 2022 midterms and how they're basically saying that without their voting rights bills passing, that our elections are legitimate, right? That's what they're saying. They're making false claims of that, okay? So at Biden's press conference yesterday, he was questioned about that, and I want you guys to actually take a look at it just in case you haven't seen it yet.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking of voting rights legislation, if this isn't passed, do you still believe the upcoming election will be fairly conducted and its results will be legitimate?
Well, it all depends on whether or not we're able to make the case to the American people that some of this is being set up to try to alter the outcome of the election.
All right, so as you can see there, Biden was pressed on that issue in which he couldn't give an answer, right? You would think he would just say yes or no, okay? But he didn't give an answer. So Kamala, who is vice president, this morning was also pressed on this issue about whether or not she thinks that the midterm elections will be free, fair, and legitimate. And this is her response, or lack of response. Take a look.
Let's talk about another comment the president made. He openly cast doubt on whether the 2022 midterm elections would be legitimate. He said it all depends, which is astonishing to hear a president question whether our elections will be legitimate. We've heard it before, but not from this president. Is he really concerned that we may not have fair and free elections?
The president has been consistent on this issue, and the issue at hand, I was there last night in the chamber of the Senate, and the issue is that there are two bills, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, that have been the solution that has been offered to address the fact that around our country, states have put in place laws that are purposely making it more difficult for the American people to vote. Laws which will be felt by at least 55 million Americans, regardless of their party affiliation, their race, their gender, or their geographic location.
Well, to the point, though, because those bills were debated. The bills were debated and they didn't pass.
If I may finish, if I may finish.
But the specific question, if you don't mind, does he think, now that these bills haven't been passed, that the 22 midterms won't be legitimate or fair or free?
Let's not conflate issues. So what we are looking at, and the topic of so much debate last night, was that we as America cannot afford to allow this blatant erosion of our democracy, and in particular, the right of all Americans who are eligible to vote to have access to the ballot unfettered. That is the topic of the conversation, and let's not be distracted by the political gamesmanship when what is truly at stake Are issues like whether Americans with disability have the opportunity to vote by mail, whether a single parent has the opportunity with 3 kids in the back seat to vote by dropping off their ballot in a drop box instead of having to stand in line with those 3 kids for hours. These are the issues that are at stake.
And the president laid a lot of
significant and pivotal issues in terms of our democracy. We had an extensive conversation about foreign policy, Savannah.
Yeah,
Well, I've met with prime ministers and presidents from around the globe, both partners and allies of ours. They are asking what is going on with voting rights in America, because they look to us as a role model of what it means to be a democracy, and they are monitoring to wonder and question whether there is an erosion of our democracy and therefore an erosion of one of the best role models of what a democracy does and can do.
All right, so you seen that, you heard that. Kamala sidesteps the question, right? And she gets snappy. She gets snappy when she's pressed about this. Okay, but before I want to get into this, I want to address something that the interviewer said that I think is just so disingenuous from the liberal media. They always try to act like, well, only one side ever does stuff like this, right? You can't be doing stuff like that. We don't see this from the Democrats where you guys ask questions about the election. And I'm like, no. The Democrats have been doing this for as long as I can remember, right? They did this under Trump, right? The whole Russiagate thing was them questioning the legitimacy of that election. That's what that was, right? That's what it was. Telling the American people that Trump was some Manchurian candidate that got helped out by Russia, right? That got helped out by Putin. Okay? That's what that was. They were false claims, by the way. False claims. Democrats have always made false claims about the elections when they don't win. Democrats in Congress did the exact same things that Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley were doing, right? So don't sit and try to play this game at like, oh, this is something Democrats don't do when they've been doing this for as long as I can remember, right? Again, it only became an issue when a side that they didn't like started doing it, right? That's when it became an issue. Okay, but Kamala, in this situation right here, is faced with the question of whether or not she believes that the 2022 midterms will be fair, legitimate elections if their voting rights bills don't pass, which they are not going to pass, right? I mean, that's been set in stone basically with the vote last night from Sinema and Joe Manchin to uphold the filibuster, okay? And in that situation, all Kamala has to do is say yes or no, yes or no, right? Either way, I mean, it's like, okay, I mean, if you say no, then obviously you're a hypocrite. But if you say yes, then your whole spiel about how democracy is under attack kind of goes out the window, right? Because if the elections are, fair and legitimate in 2022, right? If they really believe that, then what's the point of having this bill, right? What's the point of having this bill? The Democrats' whole marketing strategy behind this bill, these voting rights bills, is the idea that the elections aren't fair, okay? That's their whole marketing strategy. So now you see why they can't actually really give an answer to this question because of their silly rhetoric, right? Their conspiracies, their propaganda, their false claims that they've been pushing about democracy being under attack. They put themselves in a situation where they basically started to say things that they told us that you shouldn't be able to say, right? That is so dangerous towards our democracy, right? They're essentially making those same exact claims, right? So now they're the ones that are being pressed by the media saying, hey, the stuff that y'all are saying is starting to sound like stuff we said that you're not supposed to be saying, right? So I find it hilarious how they've walked into this trap for themselves, right? By making these outlandish claims about voter suppression. Now they're the ones that sound like the so-called insurrectionists, right? So with that being said, I find it hilarious how the mainstream media is actually calling them out on this. As they should. They should be called out about it. Because I'm telling you guys, I made this argument and I will continue to make this argument. I don't believe for 1 second that when the Democrats lose in 2022, right, in 2024 as well, that they're just going to go quietly into the night. There are people that have been radicalized by this rhetoric from the Democrats that minorities are being blocked from voting, right? So much so that we got people out here doing hunger strikes, literally dying for the right to vote. Okay, we have people that are getting arrested for the right to vote, a right that they already have, okay, because they've been radicalized by this stuff. Do not think for a second that if/when the GOP wins, that they're just going to accept it and move on. I don't think that's going to happen. because of rhetoric from extremists in their party like this.
So not only is the filibuster standing in the way of expanding and protecting voting rights, it is standing in the way, as a matter of fact, for most of the president's agenda. So what can Senator Manchin say other than the fact that he is an extremist? Him and Senator Sinema are extremists, and anybody that's hiding behind them are extremists. Because when you want to put your political concerns over democracy, when you serve in some of the highest offices of the land, then something is wrong with you. And that is why I do believe firmly that the president, not only the vision of FDR, but he got to take the message and the spirit that FDR had. Call out these folks. Say, I welcome your hatred. Gas up the jet. That's what the president should do. Take it to the streets.
Perhaps he is listening to you and taking notes ahead of his presser.
Take it to the streets, she says. Right? I find it hilarious how Nina Turner is somebody that's supposed to be giving good advice to people on the left. The same person who couldn't even win her own election, right, to become a representative in the House. For whatever reason, people go to her for advice, right? Political advice. Again, I find it fascinating. But yeah, I mean, what she's doing is she's calling Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema extremists for upholding the filibuster and not letting this voting rights thing pass because, you know, democracy, right? They need to be upholding democracy. Okay. Again, I just don't think that if the GOP wins that this is going to end in a way in which Democrats aren't going to, you know, take to the streets, right? Just like Nina Turner is saying there. Okay. So with that being said, if I'm Kevin McCarthy, right, and you win back the House in 2022, the GOP, honestly, if the Democrats, after they lose, start making these outlandish claims about voter suppression and how democracy is over and, you know, making claims about the election, I would impeach Joe Biden. Sure would. I would start the impeachment proceedings and say, you know what? You guys set the precedent that if you say stuff like this, if you push this type of stuff, that it is dangerous, okay, that you are insurrectionists if you do this. Therefore, we're going to impeach you for it. That's exactly what I would do. And I would strip the committee assignments or consider, you know, maybe even having some proceedings on maybe kicking some people out of the House, Democrats that are also pushing the same type of rhetoric. Sure would. Sure would. You know why? Because that's what the Democrats have done. The Democrats tried to do that to you, right? So you got to, hey, they're doing the same thing. Got to do it right back to them, right? Because that will teach them a lesson about making these silly claims. Or at the very least, that will teach them a lesson about trying to, you know, impeach a president and to kick people out of Congress over essentially what I would define as freedom of speech, right? So again, I'm not saying that, hey, the Democrats can't make whatever claims they want to make. I'm not saying that. In the ideal world, they can say what they want. But we don't live in an ideal world anymore because they have essentially pushed for censorship, right? And have told us that if you say stuff like this, then you're a dangerous person, right? You should be banned off social media, right? You should be impeached from office. And lo and behold, Democrats are saying the exact same thing. So you know what? Since they set this precedent, then they deserve the punishment that they have set up. Right? Biden and Kamala must be impeached if they keep making these false claims about voter suppression and democracy being under attack. Right? They have to be impeached for it because they're doing the exact same thing that they told us that you shouldn't do. Okay? So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.